Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm a Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now, so good to be with you on this Tuesday afternoon. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Currently T-minus 58 minutes, 6 seconds and counting. The planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket that you see here at the center of your screen, supporting the launch of 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites on board. This mission, dubbed Starlink 12-25, will see this Falcon 9 rocket fly in a southeasterly trajectory when it lifts off from Space Launch Complex 40 here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So good to have all of you with us here on this Tuesday afternoon. Appreciate the little more than 1,200 of you who are joining with us live at the top of the broadcast. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button, sharing the stream, allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we roll on through the count today. As you can tell by the camera shake, it's a little bit bouncy today, but gorgeous views otherwise here on Florida's Space Coast. We'll talk a little bit more about the weather as we roll on through the count, but suffice to say, it should be pretty darn spectacular for liftoff. We've got the usual team out for today's Starlink flight. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our photographer Adam Bernstein is out getting ready to track the Falcon 9 rocket and do some still photography as well. If you're not already following the fellas here, you can find our photography team of Adam Bernstein and Michael Kane at their handles on X. Adam is at ABurnNYC and Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. You can also follow us at Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. We are also on Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook. We'll be joined today with streaming assistance by our friend Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Just taking a look at Chuck and Jen's view of the Falcon 9 rocket right now. It is, of course, as it tends to be, a busy day in space and space flight, as SpaceX is preparing to send up a batch of 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites. It is also preparing to bring down 3 astronauts and a cosmonaut from the International Space Station. They undocked about an hour after midnight today, and they're making their way towards a splashdown near Florida's Big Bend in the Gulf. Splashdown expected a little before 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So, visibility for the Dragon spacecraft named Freedom coming back will be a little bit hard to see for folks that aren't close to the immediate vicinity of Florida. It unfortunately won't have that bright, brilliant streak that we've seen sometimes with a nighttime capsule splashdown. SpaceX is currently targeting a T0 liftoff time for this Starlink flight at 3:57 p.m. Eastern, 1957 UTC for our friends joining around the world. As we're getting things rolling here, I want to thank our wonderful moderators in the live chat for helping us out today. Tip of the cap to Jeff Hansen, as well as I believe I saw Clisty Lee earlier, Rick Donner. Good to have you all with us. If you do see any of the other moderators cruise on in throughout the course of the count, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight now hello. We're also able to do these live launch broadcasts thanks in no small part from our ongoing support from the channel member community here on YouTube. So I want to thank folks like Psychonaut69, Cumulus Granatus, Goku, Diane Thomas. See what else we have here today. Scod267, Joni Mahoney, Sulfur for Lunch, Kari. Good to see you all. Rich got him. Lloyd Green, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our member-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here at the Cape in 4K. Speaking of those member-only videos, we do have one that's in the works for you right now. For those who were following the flight of Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lunar lander on its Mission 1, you know that that flight has come to a close now. And just about 30 minutes before we started this broadcast, folks at the Johnson Space Center alongside Firefly Aerospace gave an update mission conclusion briefing. We were able to ask a couple of questions of the folks there in Houston. Where it's relevant to our channel members here, though, is yesterday we were able to have an interview with a member of Firefly Aerospace's leadership team to talk about not only Blue Ghost Mission 1, but go into a little bit of detail on Blue Ghost Missions 2 and Mission 3 coming down the pike. We're working on a couple of different videos for you derived from that, as well as the broad conclusion to the Blue Ghost Mission 1 chapter for Firefly Aerospace, so be sure to keep your eyes out on the channel for that. Channel members will get access to the full interview. So be sure to hit that join button just beneath the video, and certainly appreciate your ongoing support. Last little bit of housekeeping here. If you have a comment or question about this mission or any other happenings in the realm of space and spaceflight, you can follow the lead of Psychonaut69 and Wolverine Warlord by using the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that is always greatly appreciated. To that end, I want to thank Psychonaut69 for a $2 Super Chat, one of our wonderful channel members, as well as to Wolverine Warlord for a $10 Super Chat. Thanks to you both. Wolverine says, I appreciate the kind words. Will is the man. Be sure to check out Marmac 302 on marine traffic to see the drone ship ready and waiting on the map. Yes, Marmac 302 is the official name of the drone ship, otherwise known as the Shortfall of Gravitas, which is positioned several hundred miles away from Florida's Space Coast, standing by ready to receive the Falcon 9 first stage booster that you see there live at the pad. That particular booster is tail number B1077, looking to make its 19th flight today. We'll talk a little bit more about its flight history as we cruise on through the countdown. Currently T-minus 48 minutes, 52 seconds, and counting. just about 10 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director is going to make the call on the start of prop load today. Before we get to that point, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about the countdown timeline for today's mission and the sequence of events that will lead up to hopefully a good liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket there at Pad 40. Generally speaking, things start at the T-minus 38-minute mark. That's when the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load. SpaceX does this poll electronically, so if they're in a good posture to do so, it can be taken a little bit earlier than the 38-minute mark, but generally speaking, that milestone will come up in just about 10 minutes from now. Once the go-ahead for fueling is given, prop load starts with the loading of RP-1, or a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. And at the same time, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes is when they begin loading a cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same will be true on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP-1 loading concludes. And at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, we'll see the strong back chill down process get underway. That's when SpaceX is conditioning the feed lines there at the pad prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. We see this visually manifest by the so-called big vent, which starts around T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. Seeing it at that time is a good visual indication that fueling is moving along as expected, that the count is on time. The chill down process wraps up about 30 seconds before the second stage lock load begins. T-minus 7 minutes is when the engine chill down gets underway. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank is full. At T-minus 4 minutes and 30 seconds is when the strong back chill down, when the strong back retract sequence begins. That's when the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector, the strong back, reclines a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. T-minus 3 minutes is when the first stage liquid oxygen loading wraps up. Same is true on the second stage about a minute thereafter, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch at T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold-down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, targeting that liftoff at 3:57 p.m. Eastern, 1957 UTC, or T-minus 45 minutes and counting. Now T-minus 42 minutes and counting. The Starlink 12-25 mission will follow the same general flight path of the previous missions that have launched as part of the 12th group of Starlink satellites. Let's go ahead and delve into that in just a bit more detail. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Taking a look at a Google Earth view of Space Launch Complex 40 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Once the Falcon 9 rocket lifts off, it will fly in a southeasterly trajectory, moving away from Florida's Space Coast. Following that green arc, the first stage booster, B-1077, will target a landing on the drone ship we discussed a little bit earlier in the broadcast. That is called a shortfall of gravitas. If successful, this will be the 102nd booster landing on that particular drone ship and the 420th booster landing to date. SpaceX is working to certify both its first stage boosters and its payload fairings for up to 40 missions apiece. B-1077 will be flying for a 19th time today. SpaceX doesn't often talk about its payload fairings and the number of missions that they have flown. So unfortunately, we don't have good insight into the milestones being achieved by the fairing halves flying today's mission. I believe at most recent update, the most flown fairing half had achieved 23 flights. Unfortunately, we can't definitively declare that as the launch leader for SpaceX, but presumably it would be probably pretty far up there. The most flown booster still remains B-1067, which is launched and landed safely now 26 times, most recently flying back on February 15th of this year. Once the fairing half splashed down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, just a little bit beyond where the booster lands on the drone ship, they'll be scooped up by a recovery vessel like the one you see here on your screen, brought back through Port Canaveral, and then turned over to the Hangar X site, where they will be examined, refurbished, and turned around for future missions. Now T-minus 38 minutes and counting. At this point, generally speaking, the SpaceX launch director will have made the call on the start of prop load. A little bit of heat distortion today, but we are watching the base of the Falcon 9 first stage booster for signs of fueling, since, assuming past its prologue, SpaceX will not be putting out any type of notice that fueling has begun on this Falcon 9 rocket, at least publicly. If that go-ahead was in fact given, fueling set to begin now in a little less than 2.5 minutes. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank our friend and moderator, Clistia Lee, for a very generous $20 super chat. Some kind words saying, paying my absentee fee for not being here for this one. I've been fighting off allergy-related ick and going back to bed now. Behave for Jeff, Rick, and all the other mods. I'll see you on the next launch. Well, empathizing very much with the allergies that are really starting to run rampant here in Florida. I completely empathize, Clistia. Hope you feel better soon, and thanks for all you do for us at Spaceflight now. And channel member Just Martin marking 4 months with us as a member at the mission specialist level. Appreciate you sticking with us, Just Martin. Now T-minus 35 minutes and counting. At this point, we've expected fueling to have gotten underway now, just beginning on the Falcon 9 rocket. Once again, fueling starts with the loading of RP-1, or that rocket-grade kerosene, aboard the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and liquid oxygen begin to flow on board the Falcon 9's first stage. As we take a closer look at the Falcon 9 rocket, again, the wind shake is unavoidable, unfortunately. It's quite breezy here at the press site. But what you're going to be watching for is just above the bottom of your screen there with the Falcon 9 first stage booster. You should start to see a frost line form and a little bit of vapor there as super cold densified liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the booster of the rocket. Given the difference in temperature between the comparatively much warmer Florida air and the box that's flowing on board, you should also start to see a little bit of vapor forming near the base of the booster as well. Our photographer Adam is just making some adjustments. We'll come back to that view here in just a second as we approach the 33-minute mark. It's around this time that we can usually start to discern that SpaceX has in fact begun fueling, so we'll be watching for those signs of prop load I just mentioned. Time now, T-minus 31 minutes, about 30 seconds. We are starting to see some signs of fueling. That frost that I mentioned starting to build at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. Also monitoring the return of the 3 astronauts, 1 cosmonaut as part of the Crew 9 mission, getting ready to splash down later this evening. Did just hear that the 4 of them have put their flight suits back on and are go to proceed towards doing a suit leak check. They're also in the midst of making sure all unnecessary items that don't need to be out are stowed as they prepare for the rest of the deorbit process. As we approach the 27-minute mark here on the Falcon 9 flight, getting ready to send 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites to low Earth orbit. Ground to Dragon Communications confirmed that they are going to begin the start of the suit leak check. As a reminder, the 3 astronauts, 1 cosmonaut of the Crew 9 mission undocked from the International Space Station about 1:05 a.m. Eastern this morning to begin a roughly 17-hour flight to splash down off the coast of Florida's Big Bend. Splashdown is anticipated at about 5:57 p.m. Eastern this evening. Coming up at 21:57 UTC for our friends around the world. Meanwhile, back on the Falcon 9 rocket, cryogenic helium flowing on board the Falcon 9's first and now second stages. And helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Want to welcome new channel member in, Arthur Nichols, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Arthur. We're glad to have you with us. Also want to thank the more than 3,500 of you who are joining with us live this afternoon. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button, share the stream, allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage, as we've got just about 25 minutes to go before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. Coming into today's launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a 95% chance of favorable weather at liftoff, with liftoff winds being the only potential item of consideration. Winds were forecast to trend between 18 and 26 miles per hour per the forecast that was issued yesterday. As you may have noted, it is still remaining quite breezy today. Update on Crew 9. Communications from ground to Dragon confirmed that they got 4 good suit leak checks. Time T-minus 22 minutes, just about 22 seconds now. As I mentioned, the Falcon 9 first stage booster that supported this mission is launching for a 19th time. We'll go through its booster history actually just on the other side of the big vent here. I want to talk about the payload that's on board this Falcon 9 rocket getting ready to launch. 23 Starlink satellites, 13 of which feature direct-to-cell capabilities. This will be the 21st dedicated Starlink flight in 2025 and the 22nd overall with Starlink satellites on board. In 2024, according to a progress report from SpaceX, the company introduced what are called optimized versions of Starlink V2 Mini satellites. These lighter versions of the V2 Mini clock in about 1,267 pounds, or about 575 kilograms. For comparison, the other version, the former version of the V2 Mini, is about 800 kilograms in total. SpaceX has not specified, though, how often or when exactly it flies the optimized V2 Mini. But either way you look at it, the V2 Mini Starlink satellites, once they have their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use Argon Hull thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. They're built in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. They'll be deployed at about 180 miles or 291 kilometers altitude at a 43 degrees inclination. Coming up here on the start of the big vent, which should be getting going in the next few seconds. And there you see the start of that big vent, right on time. This happens as SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. That's set to begin at about T-minus 16 minutes ahead of liftoff. Now T-minus 17 minutes and counting. Got just about 30 seconds or so left on this big vent here before that wraps up. For those who may just be joining, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the Starlink 12-25 mission. The venting that you're seeing petering off is part of the process of SpaceX conditioning the feed lines there at the pad before it begins second stage liquid oxygen loading. With that now concluded, LOX will begin to flow on board the Falcon 9's second stage in about 20 seconds. A little bit earlier, I teased the flight history of this booster, going for its 19th flight today. First stage operating this mission is tail number B1077 in the SpaceX fleet. Before it goes ahead and makes that 19th flight, let's talk a little bit about where it has been before. Its first mission was in support of the flight of Crew 5 to the International Space Station. It launched the Dragon called Endurance up to the ISS. Dragon Endurance is, as a matter of fact, docked right now to the International Space Station, having just flown the Crew 10 astronauts and cosmonaut up to the orbiting outpost. Its next mission for this booster was the launch of GPS-3 space vehicle number 6. That was followed up on February 18th of 2023 by the launch of the Inmarsat 6F2 communications satellite. The first Starlink launch for this booster came on March 29th of 2023, Starlink 5-10. That was followed by a cargo Dragon mission to the space station, SpaceX's 29th Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS mission. Galaxy 37 followed up on behalf of Intelsat, a Luxembourgish American satellite company. Then a trio of Starlink satellites followed. We had Starlink 6-13 on September 1st, 6-25 on October 30th, and 6-63 on December 7th. That was followed by the launch of a Cygnus spacecraft up to the International Space Station on behalf of Northrop Grumman. The NG-20 mission lifted off on January 30th of last year. Back to Starlink land we go for a little bit. You had Starlink 6-43 on March 10th, 6-51 on April 17th, 6-63 on May 24th, 10-4 on July 28th, 8-11 on September 5th. That was followed up by the launch of the Optus X, or the TD-7 mission, followed by two more Starlink missions. You had Starlink 6-71 on January 6th, and most recently Starlink 12-18 on February 11th. And in about 13 minutes, we'll add Starlink 12-25 to that list, assuming all continues to move well with this Falcon 9 rocket. No technical issues crop up in the next roughly baker's dozen minutes. Now T-minus 10 minutes and counting. Coming up in a little less than 3 minutes from now is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That's when SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage. Starting sequence. Looking at the YouTube super chats, want to thank Monkey Tree Rob for a $5 super chat. A big thank you to Aster for a very generous $100 super chat. Thank you so much, Aster, for supporting us at that level. Really, really appreciate that. Aster says, thank you so much for streaming these events. Thank you for your support of these streams. It's made possible through the generosity of folks like yourselves, as well as our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So certainly appreciate you for that. And want to thank Wolverine Warlord for a $2 super chat as well. Thanks, Wolverine, for your ongoing support, for being a channel member here with us. Now T-minus 7 minutes and counting. Engine chill should now be underway. Coming up in about 30 seconds or so, the first stage kerosene tank should top off. Six minutes and counting. Now we're just about T-minus 5 minutes away from the planned launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. Checking back in with the progress of Crew 9 that are making their return to Earth. They're just now about 2 hours and 5 minutes away from splashing down off the coast of Florida. The deorbit burn will actually, coming up next in about 10 minutes, will be the jettison of the trunk on the Dragon spacecraft. That'll be followed about 5 minutes later at roughly 5:11 p.m. Eastern, 21:11 UTC, by the deorbit burn itself.
Strong back retract has started.
The call there that the strong back retract process is now getting underway. You can see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings opening up. And that structure parallel to the Falcon 9 rocket, the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. Just a little bit of housekeeping here. You'll notice the clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is in real time. A little bit different from what you're seeing coming in from SpaceX in the big box. Reason for that is the SpaceX feed is coming in on a slight delay. So as long as we have views of the Falcon 9 rocket from our tracking cameras, we'll be making those callouts based on real time. Now a little under 3 minutes. Should hear a call shortly for first stage liquid oxygen load being complete.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
Shortly we'll hear a similar call regarding LOX load on the second stage as we approach the 2-minute mark in this mission before liftoff. As we're wrapping up with the fueling process, want to give a big shout to a friend of the channel, Charles Briggs. Talk of Titusville for gifting 20 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Charles. A big welcome to our newest channel members.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
You're now seeing the ground gas closeouts there in real time. This is SpaceX clearing the feed lines there at the pad. About a minute and a half to go before launch now.
Ground gas closeouts.
We're approaching the 1 minute mark here. Shortly after that, you'll hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
About 40 seconds. Just waiting for the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch.
The launch director is go for launch.
And with that call, we're now less than 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket to begin the Starlink 12-25 mission. "15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on Starlink 12-25. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Now a little more than a minute into flight. Coming up on max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
MVAC engine chill.
Call you're hearing is SpaceX thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine ahead of second stage engine start. We're coming up on a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff in about 20 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine.
Vehicle trajectory is nominal.
Miko. Stage separation. And second stage engine start.
Miko.
Stage separation confirmed.
Now, a little more than 3 minutes into flight, you can see the deployment of the payload fairings on the Falcon 9 second stage.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Good call from SpaceX. Those Starlink satellites now
Both vehicle
exposed
trajectories are nominal.
to the vacuum of space for the first time on this mission. Next milestone coming up is going to be just past the 6-minute mark when the first stage entry burn will begin. That'll be a roughly 25-second burn of 3 of the engines on the Falcon 9 first stage booster. Given the clarity of the day, we still have a nice view of the first stage B-1077. What you're seeing there in the big box from our friend Pete Carstens is the cold gas thrusters at work. Those puffs that you're seeing emanate from the booster that help control its attitude or positioning as it starts to angle itself towards the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. B-1077 appears to have reached its apogee in today's flight at about 115 kilometers in altitude. Right now we're cruising at just a little more than 7,000 kilometers per hour. Now beginning to make its descent. Now, a little more than 5 minutes into flight. Again, the first stage entry burn set to begin in just about 30 seconds from now. Nice view up through the inner stage and the small top box from the SpaceX onboard camera's perspective. And a beautiful view of the Caribbean there, just off of the edge of the Merlin vacuum engine's nozzle. That entry burn set to begin in now less than 10 seconds. Entry burn beginning in real time. Lighting conditions may not be
Stage
quite
1 FTS has safed.
right to
Stage
see
1
with our
entry burn
tracking
startup.
cameras.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
With the conclusion of the entry burn, as we approach the 7th minute into this
Stage 2
flight,
FTS has safed. Both vehicle trajectories continue to be nominal.
good call on nominal trajectory. The second stage FTS being saved, that is the flight termination system, no longer needed at this stage in flight for the upper stage. Coming up on the landing burn here in the next less than 30 seconds. That'll use just one of the Merlin engines on the booster
Stage 1 transonic.
to bring it in for a touchdown on a shortfall gravitas.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 1 landing light deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And for the 19th time, B-1077 has made it
Stage
to
2 has entered terminal guidance.
base and back. That call signaling the conclusion of this first burn of the second stage.
Seago.
Good call for SECO, and presumably a nominal orbit insertion follows shortly thereafter. Assuming all continues well with the Falcon 9's upper stage, next up will be the coast phase, which is now just beginning. It'll last until about T plus 53 minutes and 59 seconds, when there will be a roughly 2-second burn, helping to circularize the orbit of the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. And the Starlink satellites on board will be deployed at about T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 8 seconds post liftoff. And with a good liftoff and landing of the booster, we're going to turn to our mission stats coming up here in just a moment. But first, I want to thank a few folks for your support this afternoon. I want to thank Lane for gifting a $10 super chat. Lane and his dad were checking things out from the Christmas area here in Florida. Give a shout out to Lester, as per requested. Thanks to Julie Bradenberg for a $5 super chat. Appreciate that, Julie. Thanks for watching with us. Florida Gal Space Coast, thanks for the $10 super chat. Really appreciate that. Thanks to channel member Chuck Close for a $25 super chat. Really appreciate that support at that level, Chuck. Good to see you as well again today. And good to see also Mel Roberts Harold with $5 super chat. Says, exciting day. Thanks for the terrific coverage. Educational, enjoyable. Can't beat it. One last little bit of education to leave you with before the attention of the space world really turns to the return of the Crew 9 astronauts and cosmonaut fully. Let's take a look at the mission stats as they currently stand with this mission. Today's flight marked the 19th trip to space and back for B-1077. That marked SpaceX's 449th Falcon 9 launch to date. This was their 32nd Falcon 9 launch of the year so far. The 391st Falcon booster reflight, with the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. No Falcon Heavies yet, which means the orbital launch for SpaceX total stands the same as the Falcon 9 number. This is their 141st orbital launch within the last 365 days. The 240th orbital launch for SpaceX from Pad 40, and the 294th orbital launch in total from this particular pad. Taking a look at the bar chart of things, where the Falcon family of rockets stands so far this year. Turning now to recoveries, this was the 102nd successful booster landing on the drone ship, a shortfall Gravitas. That marked the 335th overall SpaceX drone ship landing and the 420th booster landing for SpaceX successfully to date. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 24th orbital launch from the Sunshine State of Florida, marking the 33rd orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 37th from U.S. Rocket Company. Tip of the hat to Rocket Lab for successfully launching and deploying their payloads from 2 Electron rockets over the course of 3 days, as that company continues to increase its launch cadence. Today's flight also marked the 56th orbital launch attempt around the globe. So far, no orbital launch failures to speak of, and here's where the pie chart now stands. Want to welcome in new channel member Teresa P, joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard to you, Teresa. We're glad to have you with us. And let's go ahead and wind things down with today's Falcon 9 launch. Want to thank all of those who've been helping support this coverage. Big thanks to our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Thanks as well to Pete Carsons with Max Hugh Productions for your support in tracking the Falcon 9 rocket today. Thanks to our moderators in the live chat, Mark Otto, Rick Donner, Jeff Hansen. Appreciate all of you for helping out. Felicity Lee for being with us in spirit. Hope you feel better once again. Big thanks to our channel member community here on YouTube for making these live launch opportunities possible. Thanks as always to our photography team of Anna Bernstein and Michael Kane. Keep your eyes peeled for Adam's launch on our social channels. You can find us on Blue Sky, X, Facebook, and Threads simply by searching for Spaceflight Now. Thanks as well to our editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast and actually manning one of the tracking cameras today as well. Taking a look at that right now. Most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. Coming up a little bit later this week, we have what is set to be the 450th Falcon 9 launch to date, looking like a batch of Starshield satellites on behalf of the National Reconnaissance Office's proliferated architecture. It's coming up on the 20th. Wednesday night locally there in California. Thursday morning just after midnight for us here on the East Coast. Looking at 6:02 UTC departure for the NROL 57 mission. Again from Vandenberg Space Force Base. One other rocket that we're keeping our eye on is the Spectrum rocket from Isar Aerospace. This will be the first launch of that vehicle from the Andoya spaceport in Norway. They just got their launch permission to move forward, targeting no earlier than March 20th. No payload on board that. As some new launch providers like to say, data is the payload on board that particular mission. So we wish the folks over at Isar Aerospace best of luck with their first orbital flight attempt. And that'll go ahead and do it for us today here on the Starlink 12-25 mission. Once again, for folks that are in the Big Bend area of Florida, keep your eyes to the skies just before 6 p.m. as the Dragon spacecraft called Freedom made its departure from the space station a little bit after midnight today, looking to splash down at 5:57 p.m. in that neck of the woods just offshore near Big Bend. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.